Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Valero community meeting. Today is Tuesday, January 18th of 2022. Happy New Year, and welcome back, everyone. Today, we have just some status updates. If anyone has any other status updates, let's add those in there. But let's get started with Bridget.
Hi everyone, Happy New Year. So I am kicking things off today with maybe a little bit of a sad announcement. I have made the decision to leave VMware, and as such, I'm going to be stepping down as a maintainer for the Valero project. My last day is going to be next Friday, so Friday the 28th of January. Yeah, I just want to say huge thanks to everyone on the Valero project and the community. And this is my first time working on an open source project that's had such an active community. So it's been a really amazing learning experience. So thank you very much, everyone, for making that experience really great. Yeah, so I think before I finish up, I have been working on a data mover design. I'm going to be handing that over to the other maintainers at VMware. And then I guess just closing out anything else I need is still assigned to me. But yeah, that's it. Thank you very much, everyone.
I'm gonna miss you, Bridget.
Yeah, definitely a sad announcement on this side. So you've been so great to work with, just so brilliant and so helpful, and yeah, definitely gonna miss you here. So thank you for your for all your hard work and your contributions.
Yeah, and sticking with us through all of this craziness that was happening on the VMware side.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to make sure to take advantage of your last days here with Valero.
Definitely. Yeah, I'd be happy to hang out and chat and things, and I don't know, share whatever I can before I go. But yeah, no, thanks very much for the comments, and yeah, for being really fun to work with.
Thank you again, Bridget. You've been awesome. Anyone else want to chime in?
Oh, just that I've loved working with you, Bridget, and luckily Bridget and I live close together, so we'll probably be seeing each other after, but I'm so glad we got to work together on Valero.
All right. Thank you, Bridget. Next up, Dave.
So Bridget and I didn't coordinate this, but so I'm actually leaving VMware as well. I won't be leaving the Valero project as such, so I'm going to Caston. They've asked me to remain as a maintainer for both Valero and Astrolabe. I'll be cutting back a bit on my involvement with Valero, probably ramping up more on the Astrolabe side. So I think we'll need to submit a PR, because that means that Caston will actually be becoming part of the maintainer group for Valero. So I think that's pretty exciting. And for me personally, it's exciting. We're going to be spending more time. I'll be spending more time concentrating directly on data protection. But that's pretty much it. And I've been working on getting some docs for Astrolabe pulled together.
Well, needless to say, I'm glad that this is not goodbye. And as much as we've enjoyed working together, I've enjoyed working with you. At least we get to keep doing it.
Yeah, I hope to still see you at some of these community meetings, even if you might be ramping down a bit with Valero.
Yeah, I should be here for the community meetings.
Nice.
You know, I may be doing a bit less on code, but we're really wanting to get the Astrolabe stuff rolling, and work on getting the integration with Valero so that we have it available all over the place.
Also awesome.
Thank you, Dave, for everything you've done, and we'll see you on the other side.
Yeah, so I'll see you next week.
Right. Anyone else have any other announcements to make today? All right. I do have one announcement. I'm not leaving VMware, but Nancy Lancaster, who's on the call here, she's not on camera today, but She will be taking over as the Valero community manager starting February. So we're doing a transition period here of the next couple of weeks. So if you've seen emails from her, you will see emails from her, Slack messages and things like that as she transitions into becoming a full-time community manager for Valero. She handles 2 other projects as well, so she's going to be very busy ramping up on Valero and Astrolabe here. So welcome, Nancy.
Wow, we'll have 2 people to miss now.
Yeah.
But we'll still be able to talk on as a VMware employee, I could still Slack Jonas though. Well, heck, actually, we got Kubernetes chat too.
My DMs are always open. I'll join in every now and then to listen in and see how things go.
Sounds good. And welcome, Nancy. It's great to have you.
Yeah, I'm super excited to take on the Valero community and Astrolabe community. Looking forward to working with everybody.
Yeah, definitely. New year, new Valero, it sounds like.
Yep. Welcome, Nancy.
And we are also looking to a few more people from the engineering crew over in China who's been working on Valero for the past couple of months. We're looking to add those as maintainers as well. So we'll go through the regular maintainer promotion process. So all the maintainers here will have their vote, of course. So just per usual. So we'll add some more people as well. That's the plan. All right. We do have some discussion topics today, so let's dive into those. The first one that I wanted to bring up is from a conversation that we had last week, the Valero 1.8 release date. Eleanor, do you want to talk a little about when we're looking at the Valero 1.8 release now?
Yes, I can do that. So we've been planning a release right at the end of the month. The difficulty with that date now is that in China, it's Spring Festival / Chinese New Year. So the whole Beijing team will be out the first week of February. When we had Dave and Bridget, we thought that they could handle any issues that might arise from the release, but with all of the transitioning, we figured that it would make most sense to hold the release until after Spring Festival, so the Beijing team is available, just in case. We don't expect any bugs. We're doing lots of testing, but just in case, we don't want a panic situation. So we've landed on February 14th, Valentine's Day release, as the new release. The plan is that, I'm trying to think if I can do this by memory. I might have to look it up. Basically, where our plan is to cut an RC build, RC2 before. I'll try to pull up the dates, but the point is we'll cut RC2 before. The hope is to have everything done, and just we need to mark it as a release on February 14th. So if folks do want to do early integration testing, be in contact. We have a release that should be the same as the final one, but yeah, we are not ready to support the new release until February 14th.
Any questions, comments on the release dates here?
Has Valero ever done Easter eggs? Like maybe there'll be hearts that show up in ASCII in the.
Hey, if you have a little time to like do that, I am so supportive.
Oh, awesome. Sweet. Good first issue. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe an April Fool's joke in there sometime, somewhere as well. A little time
Yeah.
bomb.
That'd be
For
awesome.
Velero 1.9. That's the the requirement for 1.9.
Yeah, exactly. Milestone.
And sorry, I might have what I wanted to pull up. Ugh, I'm sorry. Never mind. My email is too slow. Outlook is really hating me today. I was hoping to post the exact, you know what I'll do? I can edit the document to note the RC2 dates. Yeah. And I believe RC1 was cut yesterday, FYI.
Yeah, I think that happened yesterday, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So with 1.8 having an imminent release, we also wanted to collect requirements and ideas and features for 1.9 and future as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be for 1.9, but if there's anything that you would like to add in, we do have a GitHub discussion now open here. So Nancy opened this last week. So if you have any ideas of things that you would like to see within Velero for 1.9 or 1.10 or 2.0 in the future, please voice them here. It can be just small ideas, something that you would like to see, better color output of the CLI commands, or maybe, yeah, Easter egg, Frankie. Just add in whatever you would like to see here. It doesn't have to be a full-on design document, of course, but just short ideas that we can then work with and see how they fit into the already existing 1.9 roadmap that Eleanor and the team has been working on here. See if there's anything else that we can add in here, if there's anything that ties into what you would like to see, or maybe we could move some of the ideas over to the next release planning and things like that. So please add your ideas in here. Just head over to this discussion here and, yeah, just type down, do lists of things that you would like to see. And I think Nancy is going to send this out to the distribution list as well today. So we're hoping to get some more responses there. This is our first time we're using the discussions, the GitHub discussions for this. Previously, we've used surveys, but we wanted to be a little more transparent immediately. So that's why we're using discussions here. So just put them up there, and then we can, yeah, have a look at them. Any questions on that? All right. Rafael.
Hello, everyone. I think I'm gonna go ahead and add this design on the part of the Valero 1.9 wish list. Just to give a recap to everyone on the call. This is a desire that we've been talking to have special plugins. There are additional plugins types for pre and post, backup and restore. If you're familiar with the code, there are existing hooks for doing the backup and restore per item. This is actually before the backup and after the backup, before the restore and after the restore. And the advantage of those that you can really trigger a bunch of stuff, not doing the backup and restore, but imagine expanding clusters, shrinking clusters, and so on. There's a bunch of use cases for those. So anyways, the status of this design, I've been incrementally adding some of the feedback, and the last time is we're waiting the maintainers to decide if there's anything missing on that. So I'm really happy to add whatever is missing and hopefully get this part of 1.9. Because full transparency, I do have a forked version of Velero already running with those plugins. So hopefully adding those codes that we have privately into upstream is not gonna be, well, in my vision, everything's have to be careful. It's a little bit complicated because moving parts, but I hope it's not gonna be super difficult from our team, which is me and Frankie work for. And please, please, please review it. I really want to get this going. I hate to have a private Velero version in my software. I'm a believer of contributing upstream.
Thoughts on this? I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time. So where are we at with this now?
Then you asked to have another maintainer to chime in because the hold off is the logging part on the client side. So and I said I can add all the capabilities on the client side when you want to download the logs from the backup and restore to make sure the logs from those plugins are included. So we initially said, okay, let's do in 2 steps. Let's just get the logs on the controller. We can download on the second part of the client. But if the community wants to get all bundled up with the client, be able to download the logs, and always remember the logs are not lost. The logs are always going to be part of on the bucket on the controller, but it's the ability to download the logs on the client side. If it makes sense, I'll add that as a piece, how to do it, and then we move on. So design, if I boil down the net is the logs are really needed to be part of the client, or just sitting on the server is fine. And at this point, the proposed change is almost like it's thousands of lines. So if you keep adding all this, the merge request can be pretty massive, you know. So,
Well, it was definitely on our 1.8 roadmap to get this in, so we will keep pushing to get it in. I'm assuming we might have one of the well, we'll see. If we don't have a volunteer here, then we can have one of the Beijing maintainers review this. So I will help push for that.
thank you.
But thank you for bringing this up. I'm glad you brought it to our attention. We have a lot of things in the air with Valero, and I guess things fall through the cracks sometimes. So thank you for raising this again.
Thank you, Rafael. All right, and yes, we do have time. We have one more here. One more discussion topic.
Hey folks, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. So I have a PR up. It's pretty hacky, but one of the things that I've noticed is in some of our testing, if you have a plugin that takes some period of time, backups can exponentially scale up in time. So like I had a plugin I set for like 2 seconds of sleep, and I did like 13,000 resources in my cluster, and I end up seeing like a backup take almost 19 hours or something like that. This I think is a potential issue if I understand correctly how Astrolabe's integration into Valero is working using a backup item plugin and how long that could take. And I was kind of asking, is that how Astrolabe is going to be integrated? All those other things, just to bring this to the attention of folks. I don't know if this is something that's been explored, but you have a PR up that sometimes solves some of the problem, but it's pretty hacky, and I think somebody would probably need to take it over. But I just want to bring this up and have a discussion about it, because I think it's probably pretty important for everyone here.
That PR 4444.
Potentially, Jonas. I think it's the only one that I have open. So yeah, that one. Yeah, this guy. Effectively, what I did, folks, is I asynced out the item backup, and then added a channel to write out to the tar file. So basically, each item backup is going off on its own when it's being backed up, and only when we have to write to the tar file does it all come back and coalesce. And once we've written out everything to the tar file, then the backup is complete. And that seems to have allowed us to like expand out enough that see a pretty healthy benefit when a plugin takes a period of time. the plugin doesn't take a period of time, there's almost no benefit. There's no almost no distinction. It's just when plugins take some time for enough resources. So I just wanted to bring this up. Also in the context of how Astrolabe is going to be working with what I look like to me, at least in one example I saw as a backup item plugin.
Yeah, so so the thinking right now for the Astrolabe stuff is we're going to initially use it for the volume snapshotting. And so my plan was I introduced the new item snapshotter, trying to get that merged. And so backup item action isn't really good for, it's not really designed to take snapshots. It's designed to mutate resources on backup or on restore. So item snapshotter is actually only is for actually taking snapshots and return some snapshot info that we can then store in the backup. So we get the same effect as we were getting with the volume snapshotter plugins, where there's like a volume snapshots JSON that you can look at and say what snapshot. So the idea would be to have Astrolabe behind an item snapshotter, and that should be equivalent performance to the existing snapshot plugins. So there will still be a gRPC layer, but it will be at the Astrolabe layer. We don't need to do a double indirection. The item snapshotter for Astrolabe can be linked in as part of Valero, but then the call to the Astrolabe plugin would be through gRPC. So that performance should be equivalent. As far as things like data movement, if we have snapshots, we can defer the data movement until later in the backup and do it async to the main backup, which is kind of how the vSphere plugin works right now. It's essentially how EBS works under the covers, Azure, et cetera. So we'd be exposing that to Valero. So Valero understands there's movement happening and controlling it. And the backup doesn't finish, but all the resources should have been grabbed and all the snapshots should have been taken before we start waiting for data movement to occur. So I think in the short term, we won't see an impact from the Astrolabe stuff because it should pretty much be the same. It should be equivalent performance to the existing volume snapshotters. Does that make sense?
Somebody's going to have to help me correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're calling it in a volume snapshotter, which does not happen during the backup item
So
process, correct?
So there's backup. So basically we run through backup item actions on the objects. Then so we can also run through an item snapshotting now, but it's going to be on a per resource basis. So like a PVC should trigger the item snapshotter. And then we'll go down and we'll do PVC stuff that may be, we actually take a CSI snapshot, or we may decide, oh, we don't have CSI snapshotting. We're going to go all the way down to the EBS level or the vSphere level. So I don't expect a big change in the amount of time to snapshot a single volume. They should be pretty close. So I don't think we'll see an impact there. As we move along, we add other things that can be snapshotted. We may get a little bit more there. We shouldn't be doing, well, the RESTIC backup is kind of the big one that holds things up. And if we can start to run those in parallel, where we have to like block things, that would be good. And I think what your change was doing was it was running like the backup items more in parallel. And so the question is, are you getting, if you don't have like a weird plugin that's holding things up for a long period of time, are you seeing a performance improvement?
You see a small performance improvement, but it is around when one item basically takes a period of time, multiple times. So let's say like RBAC, for instance, takes some period of time. If you have a bunch of RBAC stuff, you'll get a significant reduction.
So I haven't checked any of this. So RBAC, reading the RBAC rules is slow, or?
No, like if you have a plugin that does something that takes some period of time.
Yes.
and that plugin runs for enough
Yeah, yeah.
resources, like
Yeah, I
RBAC.
understand, but RBAC's security stuff, right? Or am I not?
Yeah, yes, but we back up RBAC resources, correct?
Okay. And they're slow to back up?
No, okay. So I'm
Sorry,
sorry.
I'm not understanding. So that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, it's okay. Maybe somebody can help me explain it, but I have a backup plugin that does something on, let's say, RBAC resources. When we do a backup and we hit thousands of RBAC resources, when that plugin does that thing, if it takes a period of time, the backup takes forever.
Right, because the plugin is slow on a per resource. It's not about RBAC, it's about the plugin being slow.
A plugin taking some period of time to do some action, correct? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so because with all of those plugins are both single threaded for each item as well as single threaded for each plugin, that's where it explodes, right?
Yeah. So my expectation is the Astrolabe stuff isn't going to affect most resources. So it's going to be things that are snapshotable. So initially it's going to be volumes. We want to extend that to things like VMs and
I would probably agree with that. I guess the question was if it was going to be a backup item. This is where my concern was. If it's going to be a backup item, then sitting and waiting for a period of time for each PVC to happen when you could be doing other work, right?
Right. So it
yeah,
shouldn't be any worse than it is currently.
Sure. I guess I'm saying that right now it's not good, and we should endeavor to make it better.
Well, I mean, I was going to say, it sounds like what the backup item kind of situation with Astrolabe, because what you tested was something that takes 2 seconds, 15,000 times, but we might have a similar slowdown if something takes, say, 30 seconds, only 500 times. I think that's kind of what you're talking about with the Astrolabe situation.
Well, that's why I'm trying to understand what the concern is, because snapshots should not be taking 30 seconds.
Right.
Have you been observing that?
No,
I
think this is what I'm getting at. Dave, is the larger concept, or my understanding of the larger concept of Astrolabe is that you're going to be adding protected entities for more than just data, right? We're talking about adding a protected entity for an operator or something like that could take some period of time, right? And
right. So
for
we'll
the
eventually want to be
future,
able to parallelize.
yeah. So for the future of this, I'm worried about the performance of X thing. Yeah, that's what I think. This is not probably like immediate concern for Astrolabe as it is today and what it's being used for. I think this is a concern and question for the future, let's say a year down the road. If we continue on the path that we're going, if we don't solve this particular problem in that path, that we could run into some problems.
I agree. I think we've already we've already been hit up with things like, well, for one, just serializing of backups is hitting people, and we currently serialize, for example, all of the snapshot actions or all of the actions, right? So parallelizing should enable us to have like multiple snapshots in flight, or multiple Astrolabe operations, or multiple backup item actions in flight. But so I agree that we should be doing this. And the question is, where do we bite ourselves when we get things running in parallel? So we've got things like pre and post to store hooks, and there's the report, and I don't know that I don't think we didn't get to the bottom of it, did we? That Restic was not running between the pre and post hooks. I remember that was a Red Hat reported issue, and Daniel was supposed to be looking at it, but I haven't heard any update on that. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember the issue. I don't know that it ever got resolved. Like as I said, Daniel was looking into it. Like I remember that issue. It turned out to be different than we initially thought it was. So then Daniel came back and said, because I think the issue as reported, Daniel said, oh, but it's not doing it. It's actually doing it. The thing we thought was the problem wasn't the problem. But then we said, well, it's still not working, and here's what we're seeing. And then that's what Daniel said. Okay, I'll have to look into the more detail. And I don't I don't think he's gotten back to that, or he's gotten back to us at least on
Okay,
that. So
well, we'll have to dig in, but that's a bit, but that's kind of a basic problem that we'd have to make sure we're not breaking. So things like pre and post hooks on the pods or whatever, assume that the pre-hook happens, then a sequence of actions happen,
Yeah.
you know, and they
Well,
could be executed in parallel in between.
yeah,
But then, yeah,
I think the issue there, and I think to kind of go beyond even the hooks, one of the things I think this kind of relates to is, and in this, I don't know whether, you know, what Sean's done here affects this or not, but for example, one of the things on the restore side is, you know, we have the additional items which says, hey, before you restore this thing, these other things need to be done. So when we're doing items and actions in parallel, how does that interact with this, you know, interrupt here to say? Because right now, you know, it's all single threaded, and we say we did this through whatever item or order. But, you know, again, you're restoring some item, and the restore plugin says, oh, wait a minute, I need this thing first. So it returns the additional items. And what the code currently does, in its single threaded way of doing it, is it finds that item, it restores that item, it runs that item's actions.
Yep.
Actually restores it to the cluster, and then it returns control to the item that said it needed it. So,
Right.
So the parallel, anything we're doing in parallel needs to respect those kinds of things somehow.
Exactly. So I think the general idea of parallelism is good. It's just that, you know, because we've been running in a single threaded mode for a while, I don't think we understand all of the things. Yeah, Jonas.
General question here. So this would be a pretty much a breaking change for how things are being done. How do we usually handle this when it comes to new features that we want to test out? Do we add them as an option to the command, like -- parallel or something like that, so we could try out the functionality and see where it breaks?
We can add it as a feature flag.
Yeah.
Or we could add it as an option. I think it would be good for us to do some actual analysis.
Yeah. I don't know that we know that it's a breaking change. I think we can say that it might be a breaking change. Yeah, in other words, we're not changing APIs here necessarily, although actually we are changing APIs if we make it optional. But you know, what we're saying is that there's a lot of things in the code that we really haven't thought about in the context of multi-threaded, and usually that means you've got thread-related bugs there. First time you try something multi-threaded, you hit a bunch of problems that we have to fix. But you know, but I don't know that we've identified anything specific that we're saying this needs to be fixed. We're just saying there's a bunch of things that we have no idea whether it's a problem. But among those bunch of things, I'm sure a few of them at least are problems.
So, you know, the path that Nolan and I have been thinking of was to start. So we weren't that concerned about per backup performance, so that may be a concern, but that wasn't what we were worried about at the time. But we were getting concerns over not being able to have multiple backups in flight simultaneously, because people are running the issues with that. You know, like a single backup can take an hour, but if it means that, you know, like you have a cluster with multiple namespaces, you're doing like each namespace individually, and you want to back up each one on the hour, but you know, one of the namespaces takes an hour, then it blocks everything else. And so we were looking at how can we get backups to run in parallel, and we were looking at very coarse-grained parallelism, where we could do something like say, yeah, you know, these, you know, we can get, that was part of the manifest proposal, was to have this manifest we could pull out at the beginning of the backup. And then if we're starting another backup, we could pull its manifest. We could say, is there any overlap? If there's no overlap, they can run in parallel, so that there would be no need for locking, was one thought. So I think the idea of running things in parallel is the right idea. The question is, where do we put the effort to get, you know, our bang for buck? Because we were thinking along the lines that getting backups running in parallel when there was no overlap would get us like a low hanging fruit. It's like, yeah, we can get a speed up where people are running multiple backups quickly without too much risk. Because if we can say, look, we can compare and we can see that there is no need for locking between these two, then you don't need to do any locking. So that was one thought. And I think we should definitely be considering, continuing on, maybe just have like a parallelism or performance series that we're looking into and we're discussing, and we kind of go back and look through the code and try to figure out what needs to be serialized and what does not need to be serialized. Like in theory, all the volume snapshots should be able to run in parallel, but there's probably something like, well, if we're doing a group for a node or something, we should do them together or not space them out too much or something like that. So it'd be worthwhile to like think through some of that. So maybe have a continuing discussion topic and we can just work through that. How does that sound?
So this is Raphael. I know John has mentioned the feature flag. I particularly like feature flag, but there's a problem when you keep creating new feature flags, never removing them. And there is the enable API groups for one classic. Actually gonna add this to Valero 1.9 if we can get rid of that. It had feature flag is a way to protect like the stability of the code when you add new stuff. I'm just thinking here out loud if we should create a generic feature flag called experimental, which is a catch-all for all this kind of stuff. Instead of having a feature flag for parallel, for performance, timeout, we create a feature flag called experimental, right? And then over time, we have this potentially break or open Pandora box for change for problems. We stick under this experimental. And then of course, the garbage collection would be a given point is removing those from experimental under this umbrella into the standard kind of thing. So just a thought that, of all these changes.
We could do both, right? So you could have an experimental flag that's kind of the umbrella, and then individual feature flags. So you can turn on experimental and turns on everything weird, or you could set individual feature flags.
I mean, the parallel seems like the kind of thing too, even once we enabled it generally, I'd like to have a flag to disable it. That way, if a customer found, that way, if we discovered in a release Valero, oh, there's a parallelism bug here, the workaround is to disable parallelism.
Now that's a good idea. That's a really good idea. Yeah, I like the experimental flag, but I also really like being able to turn off this one because we're probably not going to be able to think it all through and test it all through, unfortunately.
And that way you find the bug, you're not dead in the water until the next release. You can just disable parallelism and,
I think that's a good idea.
John, you had a good suggestion there in the chat.
Oh, all I was saying is thinking of this as a parallelism feature, I think might not. I would consider that we should probably have workers options. It's a number of workers for each set of things that we're parallelizing. If you want to turn off parallelization, you set the worker number to 1 or 0, and then that will put it to just 1. I think that would be. I think that would be a better user experience because also, users are probably going to want to increase or decrease depending on what kind of.
Yeah, that makes sense because you need that anyway. We need to limit that anyway, and there's no reason not to make that limit configurable. And once you have a configurable limit, setting it to 1 theoretically should be the same as not having parallelism.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of what I was saying.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's fine.
So what I'm hearing here, looking at feature flags, adding an experimental flag, adding a parallel flag, adding a worker configuration option or similar. Can someone please add that into the issue here, what we've discussed?
I think some of this is larger in scope. I mean, I think this issue is, I mean, basically it sounds like, because this is one example of let's parallelize, item actions. That's a completely different thing, although with similar goals to what Dave was talking about, which is parallelizing backups and restores to run at the same time.
To be real quick, just to make sure that we are not parallelizing in this particular PR the plugins and the actions themselves. What we are parallelizing is the backup of a single item, which is strictly different, right? Just to be clear.
Yeah, so within a given backup, you're running you're backing up multiple items at the same time.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And each item's actions are still single threaded, right?
Yeah. And are you only backing up the items for a given group resource at the same time, or is it across all? Because that's where the question.
We're collecting group resources together. And once you get all of the group resources collected, you get a bunch of items, and each
Yeah.
item is processed by itself, right?
Yeah.
So each item is being processed in its own thread.
So in other words, I guess I'm just, with your change here, is there a case where, you know, a pod and a PVC will be backed up at the same time in parallel, or is it only all the pods in parallel and then all the PVCs in parallel?
No, it could be a pod and a PVC are backed
Okay.
up simultaneously.
Got it. So there we will have to keep in mind some of those concerns they mentioned around the priority, because because right now the notion the kind of priority that we have where certain types have to go first, and then other ones, at least on restore, I know that's relevant. I think on the backup as well. So that may be a concern here that we'll have to work through.
Yeah, we got to have a function with additional items and make them in a group. Maybe we should parallel the group, not the item. You know what I mean? We should have the concept of group of items. For example, if I'm gonna back up a cluster that has 100 namespaces, and then, you know, you parallelize the namespace backing up, not every single item inside of the namespace, because then and of course for for certain stuff is cluster level objects. Yeah.
Yeah, we'd also had a note about making sure that our existing plugins are reentrant, because I don't think any of them have ever been called more than once at a time. So they may have data structures and stuff that are simply not locked properly. I think this is good, and
Yeah.
I would say we should. I would like to work it from. Let's go back to what like requirements we currently know we have. For example, like between, you know, pre and post hooks, the operations between there have to happen between those things. So we can't, you know, run the pre
That's
hook
an atomic operation. Yeah. So
yeah. So that's something where we have to ensure those kind of things. And are there other places? I think in general, like if we do like a pod, even without pre and post hooks, we'd probably expect that the disks get backed up, you know, by the time the pod finishes or something.
And then there's again the interrelations between the different GRs, because there's certain resources need to be in place before other ones. For example, you've got to restore the CRD before you restore the CRs that are of those types.
I think that we should start with backup and then do parallelized restore. I don't know if anybody is asking for parallelized restore.
Yeah, because restore is definitely the harder one of these, for that reason.
Right. I want to be, I think keeping this as a parallelizing of backups is probably going to be the key, because
Well, I think first thing to do is to start understanding where we can, you know, where the locks would need to be.
Yeah.
And then we can decide when to put the locks in. But having kind of an overall view of what's going on doesn't hurt. And then we can also get some tests.
I mean, the locks is one part, but I think that's where the restore is more problematic, is that there are cases where there are dependencies between resources, and you're less likely to hit that on backup. Although I seem to recall some issues even on backup where those dependencies were relevant. So those are those cases we have to make sure are handled. But yeah, the backup case is definitely an easier one than the restore one. Although if you're parallelizing entire backups and entire restores, that's that other issue separate from the items within a backup. But even in those cases, I think the most problematic of these seems to be parallelizing restores within a given items within a given restore. So I think it sounds like we're all saying that's the last thing we're going to look at here because of those challenges. But you know, the challenges for backup within a backup and the challenges for multiple backups in parallel are there's some overlap. I mean, the reentrant part of the item actions is definitely a common problem between the two. the inter item dependencies obviously only applies to the parallelizing of items, not so much the parallelizing of backups. And that's where, again, the,
Yeah, we do have some period of time. Can somebody explain to me the problem with pod and PVC being backed up at the same time?
I don't know that it's necessarily a problem, but certainly with the, it's more a matter of like, who, is there an interleaving, I guess? I don't know. It probably shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah,
definitely with the pre and post hooks on a pod, you definitely need to do, the expectation is things happen between those pre and post hooks.
Right. Yes, I think I agree with that. I guess the question I have is around, I don't think that backing up each item would impact the pre-post hooks. So I'm not as concerned about that. For a given pod,
if you're running things in parallel, right, you start spinning things off, and so these actions may not have finished by the time you run the post hook.
Ooh, if it's happening per item, right?
You're spinning these off in parallel, right? So you have like 3 PVCs on a pod. So you have to wait when you get to the post hook, you've got to wait for the 3 PVC actions to finish.
Right? Is that how it works today?
It better. Otherwise it's not correct. It may not, but that's what it needs to be doing, because that's the whole point. The pre-hook is supposed to let you, for example, quiesce the pod, do something, and then run the post hook to say, okay, the pod's ready to go again. And if you're still doing stuff that needed the pod to be quiesced, when you unquiesce it, you're broken.
Yes, it is true. I'm betting my money on it because one of my feature is relying on it.
Yeah, and that's where that issue that we had from Red Hat came in. Is it was not. It appears that it was not working properly, and that's still open. So that's,
and that is very broken. If it,
but there's the question of what does it need to be? What should it be doing now? Let's make it work right now. But also, how do we make sure it still works right when we start parallelizing?
Right, but I mean, but that's a basic contract, I think, between the pre and post hooks, is that we do a pre-hook, and right now it's simply on a pod, but we could do it on other things. But by the time we get to the post hook, all of those things that happen in between should be done. It's very simple locking, but that's essentially what's going on right now. And we also have things like reentrancy on hooks. So like if we have multiple backups running, then re-entering the pre-hook, like where we freeze the file system. So if we have a pre-hook that does an FS freeze and we run it, in backup A, and then backup B starts and it does it as well, and then backup B runs faster for whatever reason, it unfreezes it, and whatever, right? I mean, so those are the kind of things we need to look for as we go through with parallelism.
Yeah, it definitely looks like all of the hooks happen outside of every item being backed up, if I'm looking at this correctly. So if I back up a pod right now, it looks like that pod would be backed up and the hook would happen for that pod, but it would not happen based on PVCs on that pod.
It's supposed to happen before the PVCs are backed up and execute after the PVCs are finished, because the main use for it is quiescing things like databases. It may be broken, but the intent is to allow you to quiet. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. If you look at item backup for lines 123 through like 181, basically. Well, they might be a little off because I'm looking at my branch, but if you look at that guy, like you'll see that it's just based on that one particular item, and an item is a GVR namespace mapping, right? So I don't know how it would wait for every PVC unless it was doing something else. So if somebody could help me understand how this is working, maybe it's working because we order things in a certain way, but I don't understand how it's backing up 3 PVCs after executing the pre-hook and also the pod based on this code. I just don't understand it. maybe there's additional items that are being returned. But if somebody could help me understand that, that would help me understand this parallelization problem that you guys are talking about. So I can at least come up with a little bit more understanding. And I think we're running out of time. Jonas, is that what you're asking?
No, we only have a few minutes, but that's fine. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when you do a pre-hook, you quiesce the pod, take a snapshot of the PVCs, and then you back up the snapshot of the PVCs, right? You're not backing up the PVCs directly.
We never back up snapshots at this point. Snapshots happen. So we either have snapshots or resting.
Okay. Yeah, because I was thinking otherwise it would be super quick.
That's what should happen is if you take a snapshot, but basically once we take a snapshot, it's a fire and forget. We take a snapshot, that's good. Once the snapshot returns, you know, that point in time has been taken. And then things happen in the background, but Valero doesn't care about them currently. So like EBS uploads in the background, vSphere plugin uploads in the background.
Yes.
Restic should be, but that was the bug that was reported, should be happening between the pre and post hooks, because we're explicitly telling people do things like an FS freeze to freeze this while we back up the volume with Restic so that it doesn't change and we get a consistent backup, and then do an FS freeze or the FS unfreeze in the post hook. And so if it's not ensuring that the Restic is happening there, it's completely broken.
Okay, so this is specifically around stick backups. Got it. So it's
Oh,
not
no,
just.
no,
Sorry.
Restic is the worst case, but anything where we're saying, look, we want to get a consistency across multiple volumes.
Yeah,
Where
so
we can,
it handles Restic by itself. So it looks like it's volume using Restic. Maybe it does some sort of Restic backup in between those, only if it's a type pod. But it doesn't do anything around any other types of PVCs or like any other stuff not using Restic, right? Do that?
I mean, let's see. So looking here, we have pod volume backups that appended.
Yeah, we don't have to go through this. We don't have to go through. It would be really helpful for me if somebody could help me walk through this to understand when this would happen and how.
Looking at the code, I mean, can I share my screen? Where is it? So if I look at this code, and I haven't looked at it a lot, but here, so here at line 123, we're doing executing pre-hooks. And then we go through, we do some stuff, we do some
and just to make sure, right, this is a single pod is being backed up at this particular time.
I assume so. I mean, it's everything's serialized, right? So we can't do more than one thing. And so if we have pre-hooks to execute,
right,
we've got, so we're doing pre-hooks.
Okay.
And then, so here we build the set of Restic volumes to back up. Then we go through and we execute actions. I think that will actually cause snapshots to happen if there were any. And then here we're doing backup pod volumes. And this should cause all of the Restic backups to occur. That's my belief. I mean, I haven't dug into the code, but just looking at the code from the top level, and here we do post hooks.
Okay, so if we just parallelize
all that,
so if we parallelize this particular function, which is what I was doing, then it would handle that the way that you would expect it to, because this function would run single threaded for single pod.
Sure. So that's what I wanted, but what I'm saying is we should not work backwards from here's an implementation and what does it do? We should be working forwards from here's what we want it to do and make sure it does it.
I agree. I guess I was saying is that starting
it should work for the way it should work with the way things are currently working.
Yeah, it seems to me that we have a pretty good set of functions that encapsulate given actions correctly. And as long as if we think about those from the start, then that would be a decent place to start to think about it. So yeah,
and we should also be thinking through, and then we should be writing tests that actually check the behavior in the current system, make sure it works the
Oh
way
yeah,
we
totally.
expect it to work. And
Yeah.
then
And then writing unit tests to make sure that yes, I agree.
yeah, all the end-to-end tests and stuff. Because I mean, honestly, who's going to run Valero in experimental mode? Just us, probably developers. I mean, anybody
Yeah.
in like a real production environment is going to be like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think if we do this right, and I think it will have so much benefit for a lot of users that enough people will want it, that you'll see people use it. But
Well, I mean, eventually we turn it on as a general feature and with the option to turn it off. And people will use it, see the benefits, but then if they have a problem, and the turn it off flag is a really good thing, because then you say, oops, we missed something. But by the time we set it up and we say, hey, this is useful, then yeah, go Jonas, sorry.
Yeah, just want to make sure that we're mindful of the time. This is fantastic discussion. I'll make sure to send out the recording here quickly so everyone else can look at this as well, because I think this is a really important one. Sean, I say you already added one item to the ideas and features for 1.9. Could you add in this as well? So we have that captured? Because
sure.
Yeah, I think this would be a really good one to look at for the, experimental for the next release at least. Here I am putting engineers to work, sorry. All right, with that was the last discussion topic of today. Awesome discussion, everyone. Thank you, everyone. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining today. Have a fantastic rest of the week. Next week, we're back in the evening here on the East Coast, in the morning over in Beijing. So please join us then at 8 p.m. Eastern if you can. Have a good one.
Everybody.
Thanks,
folks.
bye.
Bye.
Bye, folks.